1 by 11
I was paying for it.
you know, I'm sure the whole debate and none of you are going to have the dog. That's right.
What was for the kids?
So that's it.
I had a
Did that one?
It's 9:27.
You have tons of kids.
Really?
Yeah, I can walk away from that.
That's how it works. I mean, that's how it works. They have their latest from these. Latest from the
Yeah.
22 days straight.
21 days. Jordan's actually much nicer than I am.
Yeah, we also look at it through different lenses. Yeah.
Southern hospitality.
Are we live?
Actually, they actually did a pretty good job. She's very
Keep trying to go. Come in here. I know. I was going to say, did I keep it?
I'm so glad you made it. Yeah, I
I know. It's moved from there. Nicolette.
No one's ever said no. Those two. And I have something a little bit.
What people say? How old are we really? You're 40.
Yeah, so no. So what this basically is, because it's an HDMI camera, it's like you're projecting on the screen. And then this is taking in the projection and recording it. And then matching the projection. Yeah, and we're good. Can you put a Facebook post to it? Thank you. I don't know if I spoke to him. I don't remember. Oh, I haven't seen. I haven't seen. Well, it's actually
Last night I was
Please take your favorite seat in the Laxdale Hall. For those of you who always sat in the top left-hand corner, David.
I will talk to you later. I just need to.
Okay, please take your seats. You have now received a link via email by Louisa. And if you press that link, as I said, please don't start answering questions.
Wasn't there a UN resolution about
Can
this?
we have the screen on?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, folks, this is it. We're starting. Now, there are about 77, 78 of you. You're not all here, and we take attendance now. But I'll let the then head of college do that a bit later. I'm not doing a proper welcome. This will be done by the appropriate characters, but I will just start you off with an icebreaker, a quiz that'll bring you up to speed on Pearson College today in UWC. So, this is just for fun, so someone's already tested. What year? Okay, no app. There's a link that was sent to you this morning. Yes? Yes.
Yeah, we got the link on email.
Yeah. I don't know whether the link that shows up down there is actually here and put in, but it's the link we sent. Should work. Yeah, let's make sure that enough of you are playing. No, don't start. I mean, you could actually press start survey, but don't answer. Just now, we're just waiting for people to come on board.
If you're on Gmail, check your updates. I've got my other updates.
Yeah, it depends where you get your emails from Pearson, but Louisa just sent this to the primary in our system. Show of hands, how many of you are connected now to this thing? That's good enough. And then, okay, you know what? These days, we have a very sophisticated decision-making process at Pearson College that goes all the way to consensus building. So a few of the people from now looked at me and said, no, you can't go. There's consensus required. So all of you need to be on this. Okay, no, we don't want to. Yes, welcome. What did that your head then used to say when you came in late at a village meeting? We'll hear from that head. He'll tell us.
We were never late for village meetings, were we?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're playing obviously, but don't go. No, don't go to question 2. Just stick with this one and learn. Okay. So most of you do think it's 1957, and it is because this year we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of that Nobel Peace Prize. And so, and you all know, I'm sure, what he said in that speech, right? You can all chant it. That how can people, come on, understand each other? There you go. Whoops. Okay, people don't listen to this. How many started at PC then? Started, all of you, even the 10 that we remember last night. How many of you started here? 4 cohorts. 4 cohorts, just figure out. Okay, so actually, it was bonanza years, and there were 405. How many will we have back now? And Heather laughed at the answer to this one because it's kind of a moving target right now. But anyway, but we do know that, so here's the story, right? We were 200 all these years. What did I do? Oh, how many of you have made it? Okay, thank you. Made it back. Yes, it's 77 until the last list and people coming in last night and all that, so that's pretty good. And 70 guests, so you guys are a good crowd, 140. How many will attend? That's the question. How many will attend next year? So, story is that 5-6 years ago we went down to 160. And since Desiree arrived in 215, she said, there's no way we're going to stick with 160, we're going to go up to 200 again, and maybe up and up. So, we're at 180 coming 31st of August. 177 it says there. And that's what it is. But the number is, 180. 20 new first years. 20 new first years the next year, and we'll be 200. How many countries of origin did you represent then? Yeah, you're right. How many countries of origin will the 180 students represent now? And you're, come on, go. Yeah, actually, it's quite amazing. They represent more because the diversity have just grown, and we just have less of each country. So they're at 90, and it'll go up when 20 more come next year. No, 20 more kids, but how many Canadian provinces and territories were represented then? And you know, territories were not all recognized then, but what we had then was all of them, 12. Come on, Canadians, you represent half the people in this room. You represented a quarter of the people at college, and now you represent half. Of course, it is a fact that coming back to a reunion is quite a sacrifice to come from afar, and we thank everyone who made that effort. We know that more Canadians can make it back. We know that, and we're happy that they do. So we have to recognize that, and we are very thankful and grateful to the Travel Fund donors who've made it possible for some of you, in part or in totality, to come back. So how many are you represented now? No, again, I'm on the provinces, then and now. Provinces and territories. Yeah, there are 13, but do you see anyone from Nunavut here? No. But you are from many places, and you're from 11. What percentage of males and females were you then? So while you do this, you know, there's always been this attempt at 50-50. We've rarely been 50-50, but we have. And in terms of, there's 6 rooms on the bottom and 4 on the top and all that, and we've been mixing. Right? But for a good number of years, it's pretty much a 60-40. Women, female, I don't know what to say, female. And yes, at that age, they're just a little more mature, and they do really well in their interviews. The guys are thinking about other things. But you guys had a pretty good. How many of you are here now? Of the female. You've improved your English nacho since the days of So actually, you've come back 62% female, 32% male. Yeah. How many employees, residents worked or lived at PC in your days? You never counted these people. But they were all around you. They were in the cafe, they were housekeeping, they were maintaining, they were teaching, they were caring for you. And it's amazing what the number is, because it ends up being a 1-to-4 ratio. There is 1 adult to each student. And we say adult, of course students are adults, but they don't act like it. And they don't pay their bills while they're here. So it's 1-to-4, and that, it takes a village. It takes a village to make these people become exceptional global citizens. And of those same...
So what was the answer?
109. Sorry. Oh, sorry, there was a 99 there. It's 109. And some past, of course. And of those, how many are still working? Because they're still alive and they're still around, and you've seen some of them. But actually, if working means being remunerated, right, then it's none. But of course, one who's working exceptionally hard as a volunteer is still around, and he's sitting right here. So if you want to test this little system, you can put a name. You think I missed someone. He was in your days, all of you. So I apologize then. So Mark Bannermark is there. Wow, I'm sorry. He was certainly in the list for the other group. There were 6 of them, or 7. 7. Yeah, so go ahead. No, that's you guys doing it. You're correcting me. So that's wonderful. Thank you. So now it looks like more people. It looks like Banner. And Banner's a name. Okay. What IB courses were taught then but are no longer taught now? And again, it was late last night when I did this, so this was done for the 20-year reunion. I may be mistaken because sometimes teachers came in and out of things were taught. But you're right. Those courses are no longer taught at the college, sadly. Anthropology, music, Spanish, B, and math further. Spanish is taught at ab inicio level. It's kind of a level, a notch down from B, but it's taught. But music, math further, and anthropology no longer. Okay, who's that? Who? I think I got this right because one of your years must have had English. Okay, so who were they? Okay, you got the spelling right. Who's the head now? Hey, gotta laugh again. What percentage were offered scholarships then? There's one who really sped right through the whole survey and answered it. You do understand that practically, don't you? Don't you? I think some don't. We never truly had a 100% scholarship. It was our stated policy, it was our stated wish, but honestly there were, and it depends what you define 100% scholarship, but everyone, as they still are selected on merit alone. But funds were coming from families in some instances, and from some. So, now, what do you think? Percentage of students, this was last year. I don't know what the incoming year is like. Yeah, we don't have that data. But last year, this is what it looked like. Yes, 90% of our students had some form of scholarship. 60% had full. The other 30 were on partial in varying degrees. And 10% were on no scholarship. And that is all the result of the selection process in UWCs across the world. How many alum were engaged as employees and board members then? Yeah, so Juliette Guichon, year 2, and Dolphy Havlovich, year 1, were on the board during the years. You were students here. No one was an employee. How many are engaged now? Alumni. And many of them are in this room. So the answer is 20. 20 alumni. I hope you get to meet all of them. How many genders were acknowledged then on the forums, or how we spoke about gender? How many? Yes. How many genders are acknowledged now? And this is very true and very felt on campus in every way possible. And we're still improving every year. We have to. You will have noticed, maybe it's not on, but in Japan House there's a gender-neutral bathroom. And we're beginning to investigate where else and all that. And they're wanting to go into gender-neutral levels of houses or residences. Not the college. The students are kind of talking about that. How many people liked the Pearson Facebook page then? How many people like it now? I hope you do, because you really get to see some of the stuff that's happening on campus with our alum. We try to put an alum story almost every day. And it does bring some criticism because we can't always get all the news. And that's because the alum themselves should be sending us their stories. And stories don't have to be that they're running the UN or that they've just built a financial empire. And that is a criticism of some of the people that we put out there. But I honestly, truly am trying every day to find those stories of those teachers, those homemakers, those social workers, those professors, everyone who's doing anything out there in the spirit of UWC values. We should be telling the story. There's 4,000 of us. So the answer is correct at 8,700 right now, but it's going up every day, so it's probably not correct. How many alum are on the PC LinkedIn group now? Very interesting group. You do quickly get to find out what some of your peers are doing out there in the world. Not everyone goes on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn, doctors don't need that, and most lawyers don't go there. But it's just another channel out there. It's a channel to find out if you can find a mentor. But there's a better channel than all of these, and it's called the UWC Hub, and we'll be talking about that a little more. So it's 900. It's 800, 900. So that's a great group to join. So how many are registered on the Hub? And the Hub is the new UWC equivalent of Facebook, LinkedIn, everything all wrapped up into one. And it's the place, the platform. You've all received an email. It got lost in the tons of emails that we receive every day. And it really is the place where, right now, there are more Pearsonites in that platform than any other college. We're really representing more. There's 10% of us on that. Right now, there's 9,000 people on that platform, and we represent 900 of them. So this is for current students as of this year. It's for teachers. It's for former board members, current board members, everyone who has anything to do with UWC might find a place of community on the Hub.
Since we're all here and we're all aware of what's going on, just at least for this weekend, how about resending that invitation this weekend?
We would, if I can get Luisa to stop working all the time, day and night. So I can not promise during the weekend. I certainly promise the follow-up email is the most important email you will have had. It'll have all the pictures, it'll have all the fun times you had, and so you can go directly to that one code that you need to get in.
Thank you.
Okay, how many roofs have been replaced? Have you been counting the metal roofing? So it is an indicator of just how well we are doing in terms of revamping this college. And you also know what it takes to renovate. Resources. It is 6, and they're doing one just now. How many UWC schools and colleges were there then? And it changes because over the time you guys were here, one was added. So
5 and 6.
yeah, it is 5 and 6. That's how many there were then. And then now, well, there's that
17.
Okay, it is 17, and you know the last 3 that were added by Pearson grads, Pearson alum. So the last one to be added officially opened on August 1st, and it was founded by Lin Kobayashi, year 18 from Japan, and it's UWC Japan. The opening will be, the official opening will be on September 23rd. Desiree and I will be in attendance representing the college. And in 2014, UWC Robert Bosch in Germany was co-founded by Christian Hodiger from Germany, year 2, and Jens Walterman, my first year from Germany, year 10. And then Shangshu, UWC Shangshu in China, was co-founded by 3 alum, one from USA, one from Red Cross Nordic, and one from Pearson. Yi Wang from China, year 16. So we're making babies. Where will you found a college? Oh, there you go. Which teacher had the a great, and this, we could be at it all day here. And the more you mention a name, the bigger it gets, right? That's how that thing works. Wonderful. And this is cool. Where was your favorite or secret spot? Don't tell us what you did there. So Desiree's mentioning she doesn't see sailboat because that's where they do it now. If you want inappropriate talk, you can come see me. If you want appropriate, you can see Heather or anyone else. By the way, this is like Snapchat. It'll disappear as soon as no, it won't exist. No, it does. It's just, I wish I could take a picture. I will take a picture. Okay. Guys, it's all been fun. I hope you learned a little bit. And I will now, this takes a lot of work just to figure out every little thing, believe me. Thank you to all those who helped me do this, and there are volunteers and staff members. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you to a good friend who I met when I first landed on this campus, when I landed as an employee on campus in 1990 was my first time, to launch the first summer seminar we had. And I had the great fortune of meeting the man who was the head of this college then, Tony McCann. He is now the head of then. That's what he is right now, in this moment.
Thank you, Benoit. I'm not Benoit Charlebois, by the way. The performance by Benoit is fantastic. Thank you. There's always change going on in this world, and one of the changes since we were all together here at the college is that we now are paying a great deal of much more respect and appropriate respect for the First Nations, and it's appropriate at the start of the meeting to actually recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the CMU nation. I don't remember using this thing, but I guess I'd better stick with it since you need to be able to hear. And now I'm sitting down.
Oh, wait, it's the other one.
Okay, thank you. Well, Benoit said, will I come and start off a village meeting? And I said, well, how about the subjects you used to talk about? Well, it's difficult to remember here. I've been 30 years in the business of running schools, and I was talking with Anne, who's by the way up the back there. Anne. I was talking with Anne last night, and we were just reminiscing about who was here, and we realized that, in fact, people in this room are really probably the most special group of any of the groups we had in our time, both in Pearson and in the North. It's great that so many of you have come, and to those that there are people online, I'm sorry that more people are not here. Dave Newland is a scruffy dude in public. The reality is that it's a great advantage because we can actually reach many more people. But talking, and some people were really frustrated by the time it was, So I lived with it, and I thought it was just good to have that openness, and people could learn from each other. And we learned a great deal. But the range of topics we talked about is not what is appropriate to talk about here. You may wish to talk with Desiree about it, because I am no longer running the college. I'm chairman of the board, which I'd actually much easier to be running a college. You have the authority to get on and do things. Chairman of the board, you step right back and you give advice and help, but you're not actually leading the exercise. Now, I had the privilege of being the chair of the board when David Hawley, the previous head of college, decided to move on to become number 2 man in the International Baccalaureate. We then had to find a replacement and to have the search, which is probably the most important job that a board has, is not micromanaging the institution, but actually finding a person who actually will run the college. And we went through a fairly lengthy process because, frankly, initially, we were not finding candidates who were truly going to be change makers, going to be transformational in terms of the college, because the college needs to move after 40 years into a new horizon, into a new approach. The world has changed. The marketplace has changed, if you like. And this was really important. So 40 years ago, 30 years ago for you, but 40 years ago when the college started, there was a Cold War and there was a different dynamic here in Canada, in the world. And so looking to the future, I was here at your age. Well, maybe I might even be a bit younger, actually. But I was here at your age, and now, you need to think 30 years from now where you're going to be and what kind of role you should be playing in the world. And I was very clear in my head. My job was not to be creating the future dynamic or the future ambitions for the college as I came in as chair. That was for a different generation, your generation. You are a perfect group to be here with Desiree over these next days, because she is at that stage where she's full of ambitions and ideas. I share those ambitions, don't get me wrong, and I support her, but the horizon is different. I'm not in the digital age, if you like. I'm a dinosaur, isn't that right, Anne? I have to turn to Anne for help with my technology, or my grandchildren, even better. But it is important to recognize that. And so when we had the search, and it was a pretty extensive search, we met Desiree and we said, all of us on the search committee said, wow, here's someone who is truly going to be a change maker. Not necessarily the extensive experience in this kind of education, although she had a unique experience in education of this sort at the university level. But she had used, a lot of you actually probably did encounter her on her first visit to the college at the age of 16. But I'll leave her to tell you about that. Because some of you were, maybe I hope, felt like I did on that occasion, a bit embarrassed by how we treated her and her friends when they came here, because they were doing a fantastic thing. But the Pearson College sort of, we are better than the rest of the world kind of. I'm going to leave that with you, all right, Desiree? Anyhow, we went through the process and we negotiated, and Desiree has come to join us. She has been in the official position of head of college for the last 2 years, but actually she and her family weren't able to move onto campus until January of this year. And for me, this is a real important point in the history of the college, because Desiree is here with her leadership team, a new team, with her family, and a new horizon. The fact that there are so many of you, as the little survey showed, in this room are really actively engaged in the college, whether you are a board member, or whether you're a national committee, whether you've been engaged personally in the past, and compared to any other group, I think it's probably as large a percentage engaged in that way. So it's a great group to be here, and the main reason we're here is not to listen to me sitting here trying to get comfortable on this ancient step here. It's to actually hear about the college from the present management, to hear about Desiree, and get to know Desiree, and talk to her outside of this forum. When I first came to the college, the first reunion was a reunion with Jack Matthews here. He wasn't the head of college. I was the head of college, but it was a summer reunion, and And I said to Jack as we walked up, we didn't have a Benoit around, we didn't have someone who organized things so beautifully. It was just sort of very much seat of the pants stuff. There hadn't been many reunions after only 10, 12 years of the college. It was just a startup. So we wandered in the door here, and I said, Jack sort of looked at me, and I said, Jack, this is your reunion. I don't know all these guys, I've never met them before. And he said, no, Tony, you're the first. I said, no, Jack, I'm going to sit down. I went and sat down. And Jack got up and he just simply said, ladies and gentlemen, there's one person in this room who you really must get to know well, and that person is Desiree McGraw.
Bon matin et bienvenue au Collège Pearson. Nous sommes très contents de vous recevoir parmi nous, chez vous. Welcome back to Pearson College. It's amazing to see so many friends and meet new friends. It's an honor to lead your college. Last night at the drinks after that very touching and chilly memorial on the docks, I joined some of you in the common room, and one of you, I won't name you, said, when we were meeting, said, well, wait a minute, you look like one of us. You could be one of the students. It's interesting that you call yourselves students. We call you alum. I think the students is you could be one of the students, one of us. And I said, well, because I'm your age, you would be my cohort. And so amazingly, we're at a point now where we have a head of Pearson who is our age group. In fact, older than Tony was when he started. So we have come a long way, and it's a really exciting time. My mandate from the board has been to renew and effectively refound the college for the next 50 years. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to get to know you. We've got a great team here on campus. You'll have a chance to get to know not just me, but I hope our whole team who are incredibly dedicated. Being middle-aged, I do have glasses. I need to look at some notes. But I did want to acknowledge, well, first and foremost, Tony. I couldn't ask for a better chair in terms of just the wonderful person that you are, but the depth and breadth of experience that you bring. Having headed so many colleges, this is the first time I've headed a college, so I really couldn't ask for a better chair, and I am in your debt, as is Pearson College, as is Nordic College, as is the entire United World College movement, in your debt to Tony McCown. So. Being a full-time volunteer, we also have some other incredibly dedicated volunteers with us today. So I want to acknowledge the incoming chair of our board, who is not only Canada's former Deputy Prime Minister, she has served our country in so many impactful ways, and we are grateful to Anne McClellan for her dedication and service to Canada and to Pearson College. So saw from Benoit's quiz, there are many of you who are serving on the board, on committees, on faculty, among staff. And so I want to acknowledge there are five among you who serve, of these cohorts, who serve on our board and on our committees. So I want to acknowledge Corey Wilson. Please stand. Pearson like to single out people, but studies show that when you actually acknowledge people, everybody basks in that reflected glory, that it's a good feeling for everyone, so it's okay. And Corey is not only a relatively new board member, she is a friend. She and I were on the Governor General Leadership Tour together, and it's really because of Corey, a personal commitment that I've made to reconciliation with our First Nations, and a call to action that the whole college has taken up, and we'll tell you more about that. I want to recognize the new Vice Chair of the Board, Christine Healy, year 15. tough, likes to give tough love, keeps me on my toes, does it with sharpness, but also lots of empathy and support. So we're really grateful to have Christine on our team. Jean Drouin, who's the outgoing vice chair and outgoing chair of advancement, has tirelessly worked for the college. I mean, where do we start, John, in terms of all of the time and energy that you put into Pearson College, and to really a strong vision for the future of the college? And personally, I'm indebted, because if it weren't for you, I don't think I would have taken on this role. So, John, thank you. Brian Poston, who's not with us today, has just joined our advancement committee. There's another person I want to single out who serves on our investment committee. And I'm going to get emotional already, Brett. It's too early for tears. Brett House serves on our investment committee, and has done yeoman's work in ensuring that our endowment is well managed and well invested, and it's one of our key revenue streams. And so I not only want to acknowledge the tireless work that Brett has done on behalf of the college. I know I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Brett. Not because he encouraged me to take the job. So Brett's a dear friend, an old friend. He actually discouraged me from taking that job. But because I know Brett so well and for so long, and I think that I know what a role Pearson has played in the person that he is today. And I thought if there's a college that is helping to shape people of this intellect and integrity and compassion, I want to be part of that college. One of these people are volunteers, in Tony's case, a full-time volunteer for the college, and we are in their debt. I also want to acknowledge that we have some incredible faculty and staff members from among you. Adriana Martinez. She's not here this morning, but
She's not on campus today.
she's not. Okay, but
It's
Adriana.
Jim's birthday, so she's not on campus today.
Fair enough. So year 14, a wonderful, dedicated member of our faculty, as is Clint Cuzio, our first in the history of Pearson and the United World College movement, our first ever Indigenous educator, advisor, and coordinator of reconciliation programming. So we also have from a close cohort, where's Theron Shaw, who's just joined us, year 16, who's just joined us not only as a house parent at East House, our new senior philanthropic officer. Wonderful to have Theron on board. Of course, many of you know our wonderful Heather Gross, who is an alum from year 20 and is our new, essentially, deputy head. She's vice president of education and programming, and is already in a few months in this role, 2 months in this role, really done an incredible job, and we're really excited about the future, and we'll talk more about the curriculum later.
I select to do it.
Where's Benoit? Benoit. You're lying. Bottle Benoit's energy, brain, encyclopedic memory, passion for Pearson and the UWC movement, we would be 100 colleges around the world. Benoit, your tireless energy, your incredible devotion to the college, to UWC values. Benoit and his team, and I want to also acknowledge, where's Louisa? Louisa's off working. And Emily, and Evan, and Aziz, and a whole team of volunteers, and James, where's James? So a whole, and Nicola. Aziz is right here. Evan's probably sleeping in. Anyway, the whole team that put this together, and back-to-back reunions. Friday morning, the last reunion just left, and Friday afternoon you started arriving. So this team has been just working round the clock, and the team led by Benoit. I can't think of a better person to lead our alumni and community engagement. So we're last week marked 2 years since I assumed the headship of Pearson College. So not so new anymore, but I still feel incredibly energized. I still feel like it is all new, and we have an amazing team in place. So very excited about the future of the college, and wanted to tell you a little bit about me and a little bit about my vision for the college, and then we'll turn things over to Dan Hurley, our Vice President of Advancement and External Relations, and then we'll open it up. We'll have a Q&A and go as long as you want, or as long as Benoit allows us to, because I know there are other activities on the agenda. So Tony mentioned that I did come here when I was a teenager, when I was 16. I was part of a group called SAGE, Solidarité Anti-Guerre Étudiante, based in Montreal. Make a long story short, we were doing presentations in Montreal. You have to imagine this is the end of the Cold War, and studies were showing that a quarter of Canadian students were having regular nightmares about nuclear war, and some were not planning on getting married or having children because of the threat of nuclear war. So a group of teenagers in Montreal started doing presentations in high schools about the threat of nuclear war and what we could do about it. We started getting invitations from across the country, decided to take a year off school. We traveled from Newfoundland to British Columbia, spoke in one quarter of Canadian high schools. We debated military generals. The National Film Board made a film called Mile Zero, sort of a take right here on Victoria, Mile Zero. And one of our final stops was Pearson College. And day in and day out, we've been speaking to high school students across the country. And then we came to Pearson College in May at the end of that tour. And it was a tough crowd. Who was there? Were any of you there? Okay, and I've met others of you who were in that crowd. You asked the tough questions. Tougher questions than any group, including adults across the country. You asked the tough questions, and you had really interesting perspectives that at the end of this tour felt we were learning so much. But I can say I also felt a real kinship, as difficult as it was. I felt a real kinship with Pearson students, because I think you shared our sense of idealism. You shared our sense of having impact in the world. I always describe myself as a practical idealist, and that is that we have to have clear values. We have to have ideals, but I think we have to be very practical about how we achieve them. Otherwise, we will never achieve them. So I felt that that was something that we shared, and we have to be tough and hardworking if we're going to achieve our goals and our ideals and our aspirations. So I felt a real kinship. And after the SAGE tour, went on to university and grad school, came back to Canada, worked in the Paul Martin government, which is where I had the opportunity to meet Anne McClellan as the senior advisor on international cooperation. I taught at McGill for 8 years in international development. Ran a foundation called the Jeanne Sauvé Foundation, affiliated with McGill, that brought emerging leaders from around the world to live and learn together in Montreal. Not so different from Pearson, but 10 years older, so sort of 20-somethings, in a whole range of fields. And then I ran that foundation for 8 years. And Brett was a senior fellow at the time at the foundation, and I got a call from a headhunter saying, would you put your name in the hat for Pearson College? So of course I knew Pearson based on my own experience. Brett and others who I knew who came through the college, who went to the college. And my first response after conferring with Brett was, no, 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 no. I've never run a college. Here's the names of 3 other people that you should be talking to. And they came back a month or so later and said, well, you know, just dip your toe in the water is what she said. The board would like to meet with you. So I went to Vancouver, I met with the board, and thought at the very least we could have a conversation about Pearson and Sauvé because there's so much in common. And it was a magical meeting, I think, for me anyway, and left there feeling like, wow, this is an exciting time. Pearson's at a really interesting time, and I think they are looking for a different kind of leader, and maybe in 5 years or whatever it'll be a more traditional leader again, but this time Pearson is looking for something different. And then of course my husband and I came out to visit campus, and we came during the One World rehearsals, so we were charmed, and we decided to move our family across the country. There were some bumps along the way to ultimately getting us here in January, but we are here, and we are so excited to be here on this beautiful campus and to really, it is such an honor to lead this college and to work with the thing that hasn't changed and that will never change is just the caliber, the quality, and the diversity of the students. I wish you could meet them. I wish they could meet you. It's just incredible. Our students are selected now from over 155 countries. As you know, 90% last year were on scholarship, 60% on full scholarship. Happy to talk more about the shift in policy, the means testing, which has allowed us to go back to 200 students, because we cut down to 160 a few years ago. So we're now going back to 200s, and that 200 students, and that is in part because we're means testing our students, and that all of the students who are on scholarship because they need to be on scholarship. I know that this is a tough topic and controversial for many of you, but I think happy to talk about it and some of the advantages of the new policy. So after the Jeanne Sauvé Foundation came to Pearson, and really I guess I describe myself not only as an educator and from a family of educators, both my parents are professors, many of my aunts and uncles and cousins are teachers. I have a deep respect for education and educators, but also as an advocate. And I believe profoundly in the power of young people to change the world, and essentially have devoted my life, really since the stage tour, to empowering a new generation of leaders to tackle global problems. And what better way to tackle those problems, to go that long, hard distance, than to bring young people together at a formative time in their lives to live and learn and laugh together. That's the foundation. That was the vision of Lester B. Pearson when he brought the United World College movement to Canada. And that's what we're still doing today. We'll see a video later that I think we'll find inspiring. So in terms of my priorities, they are the same as the first day I came to the college. There are three. One is cutting-edge curriculum, which is really shorthand for an educational experience that is transformative, distinctive, and innovative. What does it mean to be a Pearson student in the 21st century to tackle those complex global problems? And that is the central question. That is the central goal, and everything else is about supporting that goal. So whereas when Pearson was created, we were the first IB school in North America, we were pioneers, and now we're in a pretty crowded field. So what does it mean to be innovative and distinctive and transformative in the 21st century? I think we've got some answers to that, and we're going to continue to work on that. So we're excited to tell you more about that, and we can get into that into the discussion in terms of what we're doing today. The second is to raise the profile of the college and really engage the community. And we define community as local, right here in Metchosin, Victoria, provincially, nationally, and of course globally, and that includes first and foremost our alumni. Jens Walterman, who not only helped found Robert Bosch, is a Pearson alum, but he is also the executive director of the whole international organization of UWC. He talks about the UWC as having two pillars, the colleges and the national committees. So now there are 17 colleges and growing, 155 national committees approximately. But the third pillar are our alumni, because our alumni come from all these different countries through these national committees and go on to all of these different colleges. And so you are such an important part, you're a fundamental part of this movement, because it can't just be about the 2 years that you spent at the college, formative and transformative as those years are. It's got to be about what you go on to do. And I know that you go on to do so many different things. Some of you are in a very public profession. Some of you are working quietly behind the scenes. Some of you are working in your homes and your families and your communities. Some from national institutions and countries. Many of you are educators, scientists, doctors, bankers, NGO leaders, parents. You're each making a difference. You're each living the mission in your own unique and impactful way. And so that's what it's about. And we want to connect you not only with each other socially, like this reunion, which is awesome, but we want to be connecting our alumni across cohorts, colleges, and countries for impact. And you'll hear more about the UWC Hub and how we can use that to connect people to have impact around issues that matter. and to get experts around the table problem solving. That's really the vision of the UWC. And now, increasingly, we have the tools in this globalized world and interconnected world to achieve that vision. So raising profile, community engagement are central. The third goal is to ensure that the college is on a strong and sustainable financial footing. We have not been for decades, for many reasons, but in no small part due to an unsustainable draw on our endowment. Our endowment stands at 40 million. It could and should be quite a bit more than that. But for many years, we were drawing on our endowment at an unsustainable rate. The board has adopted a mandate, a policy, if you will, to move down to a sustainable draw of 4%, which is what's required in Canada to maintain our charitable status. We're going to get there by 2020, and we're on track to get there. We're going to do that in many different ways. First and foremost, philanthropy. That's the game changer for Pearson College, so that if we did select all 200 of our students needed to be on full scholarship, we'd be able to provide full scholarship. So that's our goal. So it's an ambitious goal. So we have very ambitious fundraising targets, and we hope that you'll be part of that as well. There is revenue from the property as well, from the facilities. There's the draw on our endowment, getting to a sustainable rate. And then there is the part of that is tuition, and that comes from fees. But as mentioned, only 10% of these last year of our students were paying full fees. That's 7 students, I believe. So we haven't done a 180. We haven't done a 180. So happy to talk about that. And in terms of alum and the engagement, one of the things that I was told just before I started, it was July of 2015, and I was at an event in, I think a couple of you were there, in Toronto. And some of the one alum in particular came up to me and said, please, 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 do not send us emails all the time only about making a financial donation. Please think about engaging us in other ways. And so that night, following that conversation, I issued a challenge to the alumni gathered, and the same for you here. Think about ways that you can contribute your time, your talent, and your treasure to Pearson College. There are so many ways you can connect now. We now have, as a result of that conversation, an alumni in residence program, and that the woman I spoke to that night, Danny MacArthur, said, I'm going to come to campus. She's an ESL teacher with extensive experience. I will bring my own tiny house. I will spend 6 months of the year on campus as a librarian, learning support, helping with English, and the other 6 months, other alum can come live on campus and share their time and their talent with the college. So that's a program that started over a year ago, just over a year ago. We now have, thanks to Benoit and Ana Maria, an alumni and community house, which is a bed and chat, because the breakfast part is at the dining hall. And many, many ways. Clint is an example of, the call to action in terms of reconciliation with our First Nations, so that never again could a Pearson student graduate without understanding the history and the culture of this place. And Clint came forward and said, well, what about an Indigenous educator? And he went through a whole process, and we chose the best candidate. So these are the conversations. So I've never had a conversation with an alum that hasn't generated some fantastic idea or initiative. So I really look forward to these conversations. I look forward to getting to know you, my peers, in the coming days and in the coming weeks and years as we work together to live the mission of the college in many diverse ways. I also just want to acknowledge, as we transition to Dan here, last night at the memorial service, Anne and I stood together, a little chilly, and we saw all these roses, and we thought, well, there can't possibly be so many of your peers and teachers who've passed. And so I just want to acknowledge your loss, and I'm sure it must be very painful. So I just want to acknowledge that loss, both individually and collectively. I'm sure you carry those spirits with you in all that you do. And I think it was a wonderful way to start the reunion, to acknowledge the past and that loss, and then to move forward in confidence and joy with each other in the future. So have an amazing few days. I know you will. And again, I look forward to getting to know you better. Thank you so much.
you a very quick overview, much of what you've already heard from Desiree, but also give you a little bit more detail in terms of the framework and the roadmap that we are following as we move forward. But I did want to just say a couple of words about why I'm here. I joined the college a year ago next week, so I'm just about completed my first year, so I'm kind of an honorary year 43. Not only as a staff person, but as a resident. My wife Kim and I approach life, we're all in when we do things. So we live here at the campus, we live here with my 11-year-old son, and just completely overwhelmed and inspired by the students of Pearson College and by the people who have gone before them, and that includes all of you. And in this past year, the ability to meet and understand and get to know all of you and your passions and whatever you're doing. You will hear in the film that will show you a very short 4-minute video. One of our students says, this is not just about coming to school, this is about a way of going through life. And I was quite completely inspired by that mission when I came here. From a personal perspective, I also was inspired by the leadership. And Desiree McGraw and I also have a common history, having worked together in federal politics a number of years ago. And so I was inspired by the fact she was appointed and came to this school. And then, of course, I've also worked with the Honorable Anne McCauley in that context as well. And so knowing that she was on the board, and many of those of you that I've got to know over the past year has really energized my work and has energized the team that I work with. I do want to say a couple of introductions to my colleague Tyrone Powell. He's Vice President of Operations and Administration. Ty is also a relative newcomer. He has 3 months on me, so he started in June of last year, heading up essentially as our Chief Operating Officer, responsible for everything from finance to infrastructure to human resources to the day-to-day operations and everything from soup to nuts that comes up Pearson College. Ty is all over that. Ty came to us from a brief stint in the private sector after 35 years serving Canada in the Canadian Forces and Royal Canadian Navy, ending his career as the Commander of Maritime Forces Pacific. And Ty is essentially almost a resident too. He lives 5 minutes down the road. So if anything happens, first person we call is Ty. Ty, you'll hear from Heather, Desiree, and myself a little bit later. I do want to send a great thanks to all the members of the organizing committee of this reunion, 30-year reunion organ. How many of you are here who are on the organizing committee? Thank you so much for everything you've done. I also want to thank, and I want to apologize, but I will thank you for Benoit. Benoit, it's wonderful to work with you, and thank you for all of your energy and your hard work in this. And I also want to thank Louisa, guys. All right. Wonderful to work with all of you and all the volunteers, faculty, staff, and otherwise who've helped make this reunion possible. Okay, I'm going to move on to our presentation here. So here's the quote that you should all have tattooed on your brain here. How can there be peace without people understanding each other, and how can important milestone not only for our namesake but also for Canada and for essentially Canada's global citizen, leading global citizen, Mr. Pearson. This year we're going to be marking this anniversary not only for the country but for this college in a number of different ways. So we plan to do a number of events here on campus, but also making an integral part of the student and faculty experience this year, whether it's through in the classroom, in the community, events that we have here on campus, projects and otherwise, so that there's an understanding. And essentially, we're creating a legacy here that we hope to do every year, so that when students come to this college, they understand why this individual is deserving of the namesake and those values that continue to endure in this period of time. Mr. Pearson received this Nobel Peace Prize for his work in helping to avert a war in the Suez region in 1956. It is interesting in that old adage about how history repeats itself, that in this time and era that we're living through, his leadership is even more important than ever and more relevant than ever. We have several specific events that are planned, both not only here on campus, but here in Victoria, as well as in other parts of the country, specifically in Toronto and Ottawa, which you will be hearing more about. So those of you that are in those communities, are going to be in those communities, or perhaps may plan to come to those communities, we welcome you and encourage you to attend with us. So we've got, and all of these events are in partnerships with organizations such as Massey College, University of Toronto, University of Victoria, Global Affairs Canada, both here in Victoria, but also in Ottawa. So you'll be hearing more details on this. And some of you in the room today have been very helpful. It's Eo and Teo here, who of course is year 15, but also is working with the Honourable Chrystia Freeland, Minister of Foreign Affairs, who is herself a UWCer, graduate of Adriatic College. And so thank you very much for all your support, Owen, and guidance, not only for this event, but in helping us understand where Pearson College can help to move forward with the federal government. We also are planning to do a number of alumni events and gatherings, some that have been planned, many that have not. So this is a call of invitation to all of you to consider in your community, in your area, if there's something that we can do with you to help mark this anniversary, but also, as Desiree was speaking about, how do we raise the profile of Pearson College and the UWC movement in your region? So we'll be speaking to you more about that over the next 12 to 18 months when we plan to do this. The final piece that I'll just raise is a project that we're working on right now under the leadership of Danny MacArthur, our year 6, who's our on-campus librarian. We were able to get some funding from the Community Foundations of Canada via the Victoria Foundation to do a digital archive project on the records that we have of Lester B. Pearson here at the college, but also to get storytelling, to be able to talk to our founders and others that have a connection to Mr. Pearson and digitize that for generations to come. So that is currently underway, and at these events we hope to be able to show some of the outcomes of that work. I'm now going to turn towards a project that this college and the leadership have been working on over the past 2 years, and that is our new strategic plan, which is essentially a roadmap for the future. And so, as Desiree explained, her mandate and our mandate as a college are rested on these 3 pillars. Providing an innovative and transformative educational program, helping to raise the profile and of the college and engagement of its supporters, including yourselves, and helping to build a sustainable financial model for the future. How did this process come to be? It was initiated in early 2015 in conjunction with the appointment of our new head of college. It involved 2 years of consultations with over 700 stakeholders. Many of you were part of that process. Many others also helped to contribute to that. And it helped us as a leadership team, especially those that are new to our role, help to shape goals and objectives for the next 3 to 5 years. And this is an ongoing project. So in the past 6 months, we have been able to come to a point where we've been able to complete this document, get board approval and direction, and now be able to come out to all of you to show you what that roadmap is going to be. But it is an iterative process. We have, in many ways, it's somewhat like on being on a whiteboard. We know where we want to go, but it's one that can be shaped by you, helps to be shaped by you as we move forward as an institution. And so in that strategic plan, we acknowledge a number of challenges that we need to address, and here are 5 of them here. How do we continue to attract the most promising students of potential to come to this college in an environment that is highly competitive and challenging? So when this college was created in the mid-1970s, we were the first international baccalaureate program, which was a program that was still in its infancy. We were a unique proposition in this country from the perspective of not only providing high-quality education, but also experiential education. Fast forward 44 years, there are multiple institutions out there that offer very similar kinds of programs, very similar kinds of missions. So how does Pearson College, the UWC movement in Canada, continue to differentiate itself from all the other competitors out there? That's a challenge we need to face. How do we continue to have an innovative program that will inspire and motivate our students, still founded on the principles that were in place when this college was created, but is dynamic for the 21st century? That is our challenge. How do we address the fact that This college was built within a year between 1973 and 74, which was an amazing feat at the time. But the fact is, all of it is coming to fruition 44 years later. Everything is aging at the same time. And the fact that, for a variety of different reasons, some of that infrastructure renewal was deferred. So now we are faced with the challenge of having to renew these residences for the future, as well as to maintain, continue to be, to meet current standards around safety and architectural standards, as well as energy efficiency. So that's a challenge. Over the time, the profile of our college has been reduced from perhaps in those early days when we were a unique proposition and we were well known across the country. Those things have changed. So that is an enormous challenge for us, but it's also a great opportunity. And of course, the final, but certainly not the least important, if not the most important, pillar is financial instability, uncertainty. And Desiree explained a little bit about that regarding our tendency to have to draw on our endowment to maintain our operating costs. That continues to be a challenge today. So the overarching goals of our strategic plan going forward are good alliteration here for the English majors in the room. 5 P's: people, program, place, profile, and prosperity. These are the 5 lenses in which you, if you will, that we will look through all of our activities, how we will evaluate what we do going forward. How do we meet each of these categories? In the category of people, of course, our primary purpose here is for the students. So we want to continue to attract the most promising students from across Canada and around the world. And in doing so, we want to continue to ensure we have that deliberate diversity that is a hallmark of this institution. And refugees in particular, which has always been a high priority for us and will continue to be. But also communities from within this country that have been traditionally underrepresented. So in particular, Indigenous peoples, but others as well. In the selection process, as well as how do we provide the supports when the students are here so that they have the same success and opportunities that all students have. And that's a partnership that we have to build, continue to build with the national committee system. How do we offer that high quality educational experience? And we'll hear more about that a bit later. And how do we create a safe and healthy and supportive learning environment for students, both in the classroom and outside the classroom? That's absolutely critical. For adults on campus, the non-student adults on campus, these stakeholders will need to all be addressed in our strategic plan. So everyone from the educators, our teachers, and those that have a teaching responsibility to the college, our staff, our residents, all of whom have a critical role, all of us have a critical role in the educational success, but also the pastoral care responsibility for our students. Our amazing host families, and many of you will have stories of host families that we continue to have those relationships today. I'm looking over to you, that both an alum as well as a host family, but there's many, many more. We need to continue to build that base of host families so that the students get that experience off campus, which will have a critical impact on them. How do we continue to engage volunteers? Everyone from those that have been pointed out who have been serving on our board of directors or as committee members or as volunteers in organizing events, as well as those that come to campus and want to contribute to the college, everything from the educational experience to the operations of the college. And of course, our donors. Many of you in the room are donors, and we thank you so much for the gifts that you have given over the years, that you continue to give, and that we hope you will continue to give or give in the future. We need to grow that donor base amongst our alumni in particular, but also other sources of funds because it really is critical for our future. For our alumni, all of you, close to 4,300 alumni now in Canada and around the world. And as Benoit pointed out in the survey, 20 alumni are currently either serving as employees or as direct volunteers on our board and our committees, which is an amazing contribution, and we will see those numbers grow over the years. And of course, those of you who may serve on national committees, how many of you have served or are serving on national committees in one capacity or another? Well, that's wonderful. And so you're an inspiration to those that will come after you, and that's critical to our system. Our objective is also to build a robust alumni relations program. So of course the reunions are a pillar of that program, but also the many other offerings that we continue to grow, not only from Pearson College, but also in partnership with UWC in engaging our alumni. So the Alumni in Residence program, we had great success with that this year, with 3 alumni participating in that program. We want to see that program grow, and the impact that that has for the student experience is wonderful. We want to continue to grow that. Life After Pearson is another example where your stories and your mentorship to today's students really have a tremendous impact on their experience. We're also looking in conjunction with UWC in terms of how we can offer other programs, short courses, or some kind of alumni forum format. So many of you are experts in your own field in some way that not only has relevance in your particular area, but also has relevance across the movement. And so is there a way that we can hold events and activities where we can help to not only share our knowledge, but also be able to address today's challenges? And then finally, as Benoit mentioned, the UWC Hub, which is less than a year old, it was only launched last fall, is becoming the social network, a tailored social network for this movement, not only for alumni, but also faculty, staff, volunteers, and the whole range. The potential of that hub is only yet getting started. The program, I'll run through this very quickly. We want to continue to equip today and tomorrow's global change makers. It's founded on the principles of peace, education, and sustainability. We want to continue to explore and enhance expeditionary learning, and we can explain why we call it expeditionary learning as a path to developing leaders. And of course, we also want to make a foundational, not only programs, but also as a way of going through life and running this college based on the fundamentals of Indigenous knowledge and reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, but not just in the Canadian context, but how does that apply around the world? On place, renewing our campus, we have a 5-year capital renewal program, which my colleague Ty is leading in partnership with all of us and members of our committee. Our priorities are to build a safe and sustainable campus for the future that is lower cost in terms of energy and carbon footprint. So our top priorities are renovating the student residences. So you're seeing that action right now. We've now renovated 2 of our residences, including Japan House, which is just in the final stages of completion. If you haven't gone to Japan House yet, we encourage you to walk through there and just see what the future will look like. We want to modernize our dining hall. As much as that wonderful dining hall looks similar to your days here, it's starting to age, especially in the kitchen. So we are having to renew our infrastructure within the dining hall, but also our long-term plan is to grow that dining hall, not only for our growing student population, but also as a venue for external groups, both those aligned with UWC and from outside, to come here, use this as a facility and help us generate revenue. And then of course there's a whole range of other facilities that help to support the learning and living environments here that we can speak about later, that is on our priority list. And then as we look forward, we're also, in terms of rebuilding, renewing the campus as it is today and what it needs to be for the future, we're also looking at new ideas on how we can inspire our students and inspire our stakeholders for the future. And one of the new ideas that we have is creating a global center for peace and reconciliation. This is, in many ways, the new big idea, that we are just only at the very beginning of conversations of what that might be and how that might fit with Pearson's mandate. So we see this as a flagship project for the future. It can be in many ways a destination center for organizations who want to come here and discuss the critical issues of the day around peace, global understanding, as well as reconciliation. What that looks like, what that mandate is something that's being shaped, and this is an invitation to all of you to be part of that conversation, helping to shape what that's going to look like in the future. It will be built on the legacy of Lester B. Pearson, his contribution to the world, and as well as to Canada. And this is also something that will help to raise our profile, not only as an educational institution, but as a place. We envision this could be potentially a place where G7 meetings could be held. Not only because of our educational mandate, helping to interact with our students and helping to enhance their educational experience, but also because of our geographic location. We're in a good location to be able to hold something of this kind. Desiree sort of compared it in many ways to, say, at Camp David or Wye River in the United States, where there's a more of a secluded location for these critical issues, but it has to be in a way that is relevant to the 21st century. I had a great conversation with some of our board members yesterday about that they got some of the ideas around this, and Could this be a place that also embraces technology, where we can have, say, our students connect with other UWCs around the world in a virtual, say, telepresence way? But it could also be something for organizations to utilize as well. So lots more to talk about on that, but this is one of the big ideas that we're talking about right now. Prosperity, as you heard in the remarks, we are in the process of increasing our students' population back to 200 over the next few years. So 20 some students coming in this year, another 20 or so coming in next year to get us back to 200. This is critical for our financial stability, but also we are in conversation as to whether there is the possibility of growing our student population. And if we are to do that, would that be on a sustainable model? What would that look like for the future? That's a long-term conversation. The short term right now is to get us back to 200 and get us back into that sustainable financial model. But in doing so, ensuring we preserve the mix of our students. And you heard this from Desiree. We are not shifting entirely to a direct entry model. That is not our intention. We are continuing to build on the fundamentals that built this college, that every student that deserves to be here will come to this college. But how do we do it in a sustainable way? And then finally, how are we going to bring in more revenue aside from tuition? It is going to be through philanthropy. It's going to be through the contributions through all of you and other sources of funds, whether it's organizations, foundations, NGOs, governments. That's what's going to be critical for us. So over the next year or so, we are building the groundwork for a fundraising campaign that will help to support those capital needs, will help to support our scholarship needs, and help to build our endowment to a place where this college will be flying for the future. And so, as Desiree mentioned, we're looking at a variety of different sources, but and part of this is also how do we engage governments to be part of this college. Most of the colleges in the world have some sort of support from a government or a major foundation sponsor. Pearson does not have that. And so how do we re-engage, for example, the federal government, who were there to help fund this college back in the 1970s? How do we engage provinces like British Columbia again, and other provinces and territories? Many of the Canadians here were supported by governments in one way or another. How do we re-engage them? So we're actively working on that, leveraging our contact, and we invite you to be part of that conversation in any way possible to make that happen. Thank you very much. There's going to be an opportunity to ask us lots of questions, both here and around the next 4 days, but this is an exciting time to be here at Pearson College, and we invite you to be part of this conversation and part of this journey as we refound this college for the next 40 years. We're going to go to a break in just a minute, but I've got a video. Oh, I'm getting the signal here. So
Do the video. Do the video.
Okay.
But just before the video, and the video is so great. We had a cookie break planned, so hold on to your cookie break cravings, or go out. But but we're going to be having a Q&A. I mean, it's all fresh. You all heard this. Great speeches, and you can ask direct questions to all these folks. So, cue movie. Are you ready for that?
I'm cueing it.
You're doing it.
Yeah, it's all right here.
Not quite. That's what I meant by.
Okay. I had it all figured out. Something happened up there.
This is when you go knock knock. No.
There we go.
Sadly, those of you who need to go to race rocks need to be on the docks if you're still in the room.
Here we go.
We have this community of people from around the world who work together with the goal of peace and a sustainable future. different ideas, different backgrounds, and we bring them together, and people are willing to share.
To come to a school where there was literally people from countries I didn't even know just to excite me and really attract me. I think that was what really drew me here.
The fact that we are all here and we live together is what brings us together and makes us stronger.
I remember us saying, before being Muslim, for example, before being a man, before being from this country, I'm a human being, and I learned that here. They were selected not because they had money or not, but because they were doing something that was maybe challenging the status quo. They want to make changes. They want to look for a different future, and many of them they know they have the power to make it happen.
I would love to continue in a major that will make me able to do something in the world, to make a difference.
I came from a school system where everything was very linear, and I could immediately see what was coming next for me. We're kind of allowed to do what we want in order to further our learning. If I want to build a vacuum cannon in the physics lab, if I want to build a canoe, then I can do that. If we could enable the students to make mistakes and also to challenge us, in my mind that's the biggest thing we can do, simply to enable them to challenge.
Everybody, the moment they start on campus, is stepping out of their comfort zone. That sense of actually being somewhere when a lot of things are not familiar actually enables an acceleration of learning and understanding.
I found a lot of possibility in my life. I started to try a lot of new things I never tried before.
We have an amazing relationship with our teachers where hands-on learning, we make it a reality instead of a construct.
And when you really experience what you're learning, it creates so much more broad learning and so much deeper learning.
We're constantly discovering new things, and that's, for me, changing the way I see education. I don't see it as a classroom anymore. I don't see it as an institution. I see it as a way of going through life.
What do you think? So this is just a short 4-minute documentary, obviously, but it's part of a wider documentary that's being produced by the Earth Network on unique schools around the world. And I understand that film will be premiered in the next 3 to 4 months. So we'll be sharing that information with you as we go forward. But it's a great introduction. I've been using that in meetings with donors and with stakeholders, and it really does draw folks in. So, Benoit, over to you for the next steps.
So we will start the Q&A. If you do need to have a biological break or some cookie, just do that. We will have a second mic for people to ask the question, because we are taping this for others to listen to after. So, on to you.
It's useful. Yes, for that purpose. Where's the second mic? I think it's upstairs.
All right, over to you. And if I can just ask you to I know you all know each other. We don't, so please let us know your name and
I'm Reggie Guzman from New Zealand. Really interested to hear more about
Yes, that's me.
very interested to do that.
Right. Why don't we take a couple more questions and we'll kind of fan out here.
Okay, right beside you.
Yeah, I'm Christina. Yeah, I'm Christina, originally from Germany, year 14, living in Lebanon. I'd like to know more about the Peace and Reconciliation Program because this is the field I work in Lebanon. That's the field I work in Lebanon. We're very interested in connecting with other organizations around the world and exchanging experiences.
Yeah. Maybe we'll take a couple more.
Hector.
My name is Hector Vicencio from Mexico, year 13. I was just wondering, it's just probably a yes or no question. Are you considering solar tiling in order to improve the efficiency of the college?
Now we're talking Elon.
Oh. I was just wondering if that is one target. If you're renewing now, that's one way you might consider going. Just wondering.
And one more.
There's one up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Aparna Rao from India. I'd like to hear more about how you support, and we spoke a bit about this designations last night, but I'd love to bring it to this forum. I'd love to know how you support individual learning styles of different students, whether it be language-based learning supports that they need, or perhaps even social-emotional health in terms of the huge transitions that then compound the normative changes of adolescence. So we'd love to hear it from both a special sort of extra needs point of view in education, as well as from a behavioral health and counseling.
Was that?
I think we're good with 4. Dave, and we'll come back to you. So I'm going to suggest that the first question, Echo's question around sustainability, go to Ty Pyle. And then Heather, to address the question that you've just asked around learning styles and support for students. I'd then like to speak to the Global Center for Peace and Reconciliation and pivot to Clint as well, the reconciliation piece. I just want to say before Ty answers sustainability questions, I didn't really introduce him properly. I know Dan said a few words, but I just want to say that when I accepted this job, one of the conditions essentially was to have a very strong COO. Who was really strong on operations, and sort of had this dream, sort of this checklist, and Ty kind of went way beyond 100 applications. He stood out. We are so lucky to have Ty that he's chosen at this stage to devote his time and his talent to Pearson College. We couldn't have asked for a better person in this role, and he also just his whole background in peacekeeping and military is really, and your devotion to the mission. So I would also encourage you to get to know Ty a little bit about and his motivations for coming to Pearson College. So over to you, Ty. I think we're doing it without mics.
Oh no, that's good. So great question on sustainability. One of the biggest issues on the planet right now is to be sustainable. So you'll probably notice if you're staying in some of the non-renovated houses that those baseboard heaters are probably the same ones you kicked back in 1987 or 88 or 89. Very inefficient, and they're throughout the campus. And most of the windows on campus are still single pane. We are probably upwards of about $180,000 a year in expenses just to heat the college. So it was one of my big challenges was to come in and, step by step, get rid of the baseboards, bring in heat pump technology to heat our buildings and cool them in the summer, and create about 70% efficiency just by doing that. The windows also, as we move through the renovations, are all becoming thermal, double paned, modern, very energy efficient, argon-filled windows. So we're step by step trying to create a much more efficient campus. In terms of sustainability, The roofs, I wish that we could have had the tile technology like right away to put on these roofs, especially the Molson pool. It's ideally located to provide a lot of energy and be fully self-sustainable through those means. Unfortunately, we sort of had to repair the leaks first. Just about every building on campus leaks, and we've got the bucket brigade starting in about November here and over there and in the corner. But as you saw in the graphic that Benoit presented, 9 roofs. I mean, it's a lot. And you know, 3 this summer, big ones, the library, the academic building, and Japan House, of course, completed. And we're going to do the student common room as well, the LCAM building. So we're step by step going to completely waterproof at least the buildings on campus, which is sort of a sustainability action in and of itself to protect our infrastructure. Solar. There was a turbine, sort of a current and tidal power turbine project at Race Rocks a few years ago. It didn't go because of the very unpredictable strength of the tides and currents at Race Rocks, and they couldn't get sort of steady generating power out of it. So the project ended. But we are the beneficiaries of some of the solar panels that they left behind as part of that project. And this past summer, there were 2 very old diesel generators out of Race Rocks, 25 kilowatt and a 15 kilowatt, that were left there by the Canadian Coast Guard back in the 1970s. They were both obsolescent. One of them had stopped working. And we still need power at Race Rocks to continue the work that we're doing, both research-wise and for our eco-guardianship. So we took a grant that was a few years old, and we brought out a brand new modern generator, which is going to use about 1/4 the fuel of the previous 2, reducing our carbon footprint. It has enabled our inverters and our battery bank for the solar panels, so such that this past summer, from about the beginning of June to the end of July, we used only 21 liters of fuel. So it's just a massive difference from what it was before in actually powering the island. We have our own desalination plant, which this summer has been completely powered by solar. And so we want to bring those type of projects, working with major sponsors that we might be able to get here, right here in Victoria. We've been working with them, and I'm hoping that the more we work with them, the more they're going to be encouraged to support us with sustainable projects here on campus. The greenhouse is very much a teacher-led activity that the students participate in. We are coming up with a new waste management program here on the campus. Part of it is to deter wild animals from coming on campus, the bears, etc. And the second part is just to be very much more sustainability minded across our community. New recycling program, and finally we have a challenge coming out to the students, staff, residents, faculty, everybody, and it's called our energy challenge. That $180,000 a year bill, my challenge to the community is to reduce it by 15% by the end of June next year. And that's just shutting doors, closing windows, turning the lights off, all the stuff that we can do to save energy. The bees, great question. That is also very much a student-generated and led activity. So the bees are currently away on summer vacation. They're here in Metchosin with a beekeeper, and in the fall we hope to get the bees back. And it'll be primarily for their hibernation period through the winter, but we do, obviously, you saw the students pulling out the panels and getting honey and making our own Pearson honey.
Which will be auctioned at your
It's very precious.
So yeah, great student initiative. I've taken up a lot of time here, so
Great,
hopefully
thanks,
answer
Ty.
some of your questions.
And over to Heather.
Sure, thank you. So my first instinct is, yes, come work with us. That's wonderful. Aparna, thank you for your comment and your question. I'm going to take a step back and just say that many of the issues you brought up around individualized learning needs, also social, emotional and behavioral needs, we've done a couple things. One thing that we have done already to this point is definitely introduced more support. So our Student Health and Wellness Center is greatly enlarged from the late 80s, but also is very targeted. We have people who have different specialties, counselors with different specialties, as well as our full-time nurse, and people on on our staff are being trained in a lot of different areas to be able to have keen insight into who maybe would require some of those services. We've also introduced more formalized learning support. I expect most of you remember going to your house parent's house at 10 p.m. before the exam and saying, I need help for tomorrow. And while that still happens, we also have more formalized tutoring, both with English language learning issues as well as with mathematics and some other subject area items. So we have more support available in those two areas. What we're working on now is making sure that each individual student's learning plan is really more individualized for them. And so this is something that a lot of schools are doing. Instead of setting up these rules that every student at Pearson will do this, 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 and this, more setting up an opportunity for students to build reflection skills, to know what kinds of skills and attributes, both academically and socially and otherwise, they're looking for, and then how they're going to apply those. And our house parenting program, our advisor program, and our individual student opportunities for reflecting on these things are all undergoing a transition. So I say that not to say, yeah, we've thought of it, we got it under control. I say that to say we're thinking about this. We've also engaged a researcher who was at Simon Fraser University and is now at UVic, who's been for 8 years doing a health and wellness survey with our students. So we have some really interesting data that can inform some of our decisions about where to put our resources. And that is a baseline that we're using, but I think switching to thinking about our individualized plans for each student is going to really allow us to map onto the curriculum, both academic and co-curricular, more innovation for each individual. So I'd love to talk with you more about it, and anyone else who's in this field, I know there's high school principals and others in the room, I'd love to talk with you more about some of that and what you're doing in your areas.
And just to build on that,
right?
We had a great conversation last night, and just to bring this back to alumni engagement with your expertise at Harvard, the opportunity to come and spend a day or two on campus and meet with our faculty and our team. Those of you with expertise, like, please don't be shy. This is not just a token thing. Like, please let us know how you can help. Like, really come forward, and it's being getting actually quite concrete. Now with the Alumni in Residence program and Alumni in Community House, we have the space to actually literally accommodate you with your different areas of expertise, whatever that may be that can help. If you're in education, it's pretty obvious how you might help, but there may be some of you who are experts in sustainability or other areas where the college can benefit. So we are keenly interested in your, your contribution, your time, and your talent. Pivoting to the reconciliation, the peace and reconciliation questions, you've heard from Dan some ideas. These are still early stages. It's a little bit like, Pearson 2.0. What does it mean, going forward in the 21st century? And I fundamentally believe that Pearson is already a global center for peace building, and that building on that history here in Canada, and now embracing reconciliation, still very early days, that we provide a unique venue, not only because of the place, but our mission to be a place for teachers and for teaching and training and research and learning and mediation and conferences and summits around conflict resolution and reconciliation. In speaking with some local partners, both Shiano First Nation and Machosen, they're keenly interested. We've even spoken with some senior officials in Ottawa who have said, we're sort of limited when we host a G7 country by these, high-end resorts, and looking for different venues. And what better venue than having a meeting here and then going out and having a canoe ride with the local chief, having a meal with some of our students, the stakeholders, the people who will be directly impacted by the decisions that leaders make. So lots of ideas. I know that you yourselves are shaping some sessions which you will be leading. I would encourage you, Theron has led a number of visioning sessions with our staff, faculty, and board. Perhaps time permitting, availability, but we'd love those of you who will have some great ideas around this to share those with us. Again, there may be a session around education, and some of you who are educators could come together. So obviously building on your own areas of expertise, we would, even here, while we're here together, come together and talk about these things and learn from you. And so I've talked a little bit about the conflict reconciliation. conflict peace in terms of the Global Center for Peace and Reconciliation. And I'd just like to invite Clint to talk about some of the work that he's doing.
Yeah, so hello, Blanket. Hello to everyone. I coordinate the village gatherings now. I just look at the agendas, so it's really weird. I have a mic and sit up here. So most of you are aware of the term reconciliation. A lot of Canadians here. Those who aren't, Canada has been using that phrase to talk about its relationship between settler society and First Nations in Canada. And it hasn't gone well. Over the past 150 years, that's why I wear this shirt. It has a different meaning for me. And it really troubled me when I was a student here that there just wasn't the educational resources available for anyone. Some of the displays of Indigenous culture and such, I almost feel embarrassed to have been a part of, because it was like sort of this even myself, I just thought, well, what was expected of me to put on to show some nativeness to this college, and even I didn't have that support. In fact, coming here, I was the first time I felt actually native in a lot of ways. I always thought I was Canadian, and I started feeling not Canadian here. And that's why I started slowly reaching out over the years to support the Indigenous students that were on campus. And there wasn't really so much the space before Desiree to engage in that. But as Desiree said, her work with Corey and awareness of the work that Canada's trying to do brought that space here at the college. And a lot of high schools in Canada are fully engaged in reconciliation, trying to inform all its students about the land they're on, what happened, that it wasn't just gifted to settlers as they showed up. And a lot of people, all of you who showed up, weren't even aware of what happened here. I've heard stories from people who say, oh, I heard the local First Nation gave it as a gift to the college, and it was all very nice, and what is all this treaty talk now? And so we just didn't know. I mean, I didn't know about Indian residential schools, another thing. So the goal is to make sure that my goal, and I'm trying to infuse it into everyone I work with, and the students and alumni, is to make sure that every student who comes here doesn't leave here not knowing where they've been, the history of the lands, and to know all of that. Because otherwise you come up with false narratives, right? Like if you just drive past Beecher Bay Reserve and you see the poverty and you think, oh, I guess they just don't like going to school, they just don't work very hard, that's not their values. That's the false narrative, right? But if you don't have another one, you might come to those conclusions. So some of my most difficult conversations are still with Canadian students here. Sometimes other students get it from other countries, awareness of land displacement and such. So I think that's one of the steps in reconciliation that the college is engaging in, is just working with the students, working with faculty, engaging with the curriculum. So economics teachers reached out to me and said, you know, our curriculum is really Eurocentric. Are there other perspectives we could give? So we held an evening session with all the economics students to try and look at some economic Indigenous models with them. I'm trying to do that with all of my colleagues when there's time. The best place for that is TOK, so I teach TOK half-time. And then I get to sit in and guest lecture with some of my colleagues. So the IB squeezed in Indigenous ways of knowing. It doesn't really fit in there, so I try and fix that up a bit in the other classes to address it in a few sessions. The students who have me as their teacher get a little bit more, so that's fun. But the biggest piece, I think, for this college, which has been happening already in this year, and kudos to Desiree for leaping into it, is as an institution to start engaging. So I've heard a lot of nice speeches and talks from politicians and principals and such, but this was the first time this year that I've seen a head of a school apologize around an issue to a First Nations person. And so we had people who have the best intentions always to engage with First Nations, usually, but we sort of had a bit of a mix-up with race rocks and the naming, and we had thought we had permission to use a certain name, but actually the person who gave the permission, it wasn't their permission to give, so inadvertently the college has stepped on the toes of a local First Nations person by taking their family's name. So we did a lot of work behind the scenes to see what could be done to heal those wounds, and in the end had a public ceremony that the students were part of and others from the community where Desiree apologized unequivocally, saying, you know, we got this wrong and we apologize and we want to do things better. And having just done that, the person then stood up and said, you know what, now that you are acknowledging that this was my family's name, you can use it. I'm allowing this. And that's the thing. It's about actually the institution leading the way on that. And I would like to think that Pearson College, of all places, could do the work around reconciliation better than any other school in Canada. We can't say that right now because we've just started on this as sort of an idea to engage with. So that's some of the work I've been doing, is working with faculty, working with administration, just to give some advice on the ways to approach that, as well working with the students as much as possible. And so before we can call ourselves a Peace and Reconciliation Center, we have to exhibit that as an institution. So we've started that work, and then we'll continue.
You have a loud voice. Go ahead. Ask your question.
Yeah, my question was, and thanks, Clint, so much for that. It's been really enjoyable just to watch that process occur. I saw the statements in Dan's bullet points around what I'll call broadly inclusivity. And the one thing that really occurs to me here, and it's not a criticism, it's genuinely a question, is that the college, I love the work that's going on with the multiple gender initiatives and the bathrooms and so on. I love the reconciliation engagement, all those things. The one way that the college seems to me, from a fundamental point of view, exclusive, is that for a disabled person, a physically disabled or potentially otherwise disabled person, it's just architecturally a nightmare. And I did not see a particular inclusion of the word disability or disabled, and I'm curious. I know those conversations must take place, so maybe if you could report on that.
Thank you. Diana, year 14. Lost my glasses. My question is with regards to the innovation.
I'm Leah, year 14. I learned yesterday that there's a suggestion that the pool may be closing permanently, and I just wondered about that.
Time to do that.
Time.
Yes. I'm April from year 14. I have April from year 14. I have actually two questions. One is about one of the problems raised about differentiating Pearson College in this challenging world of colleges and competitiveness. And I've been working as a national committee and in close contact with the international office and so on, organizing meetings and short courses. So I'm really in the movement, and I know this tremendous guy, Shelby Davis, had an enormous impact on UWC movement in terms of the scholarship program he has introduced, which attracts a lot of good students programs. So I'm curious to know if, as Pearson College, you are doing some kind of a work with Canadian universities of the kind that Shelby Davis has been doing. And my second question is about diversity. In a lot of the meetings we have, I have attended, the major question at the moment is what is the attitude of the UWCs towards refugees? Because there's a great concern among the alumni, or in the world, let's say, that UWC becoming a refugee school, which we should refrain ourselves from, in one sense, to protect our internationalism, cultural understanding, and so on. So I would like to know your attitude towards refugee policy.
I think there's two more.
Okay, you go for this. Ronald from Ontario, year 13. My question is around student voice. Because forums like these, even though we may feel comfortable because there's a connection to a common experience here, I think it would be fair to say that while some people were able to have voice in those forums, the equity of access to student voice was not the same. And I'm wondering what kind of structures or forums the college is instituting to ensure that every student can have a voice, irrespective of perhaps their cultural background, language ability, because that will contribute, in my mind, certainly would contribute and enhance the exchange of ideas.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeremy from Australia, year 14. Two questions, sorry to do this to you. First is, with the new process in terms of having a means-based selection, not selection process, but assessment process in terms of financial contribution, how do you ensure the integrity of that, that it really is blind until the selection process? It'd be useful to understand the details of that. Second is, what advance has there been in terms of preparing students to leave the college and after school? I think that's an experience many of us thought could have been handled better than it actually was, and particularly those who are going back outside of the country. I think it can be quite a sense of abandonment at times. So what process or what progress have you made on that?
Great. So, and one more. Or two. Oh my goodness. Okay. I wonder. Okay.
My question has to do with risk. Risk.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. Sharon Sharir from year 12.
Sharon.
From Canada. My question has to do with risk. We have seen as time has gone on and the college has become, I would say, more sophisticated, and also I think as I have noticed in the world, there has been less willingness, let's say, to take on risk. That is something that I've seen, happen with the college. We've seen it with the alcohol not happening anymore. We've seen it with forms, even just to get a photo done here, I have to sign a consent form. And I see that there's a bit of a tension. And I heard that I heard firefighting service, I just heard this this morning, I think, is no longer present here because of, I guess, risk issues. And I guess my question is related to the fact that when we came here, the college service aspect was informed a lot by the same people that started Outward Bound and other programs where in fact risk was considered appropriate and important and a way to bind people, students, together. And so it seems to me there's a tension there now between we don't want to have risk in some ways, but on the other hand, we did and maybe want to still have some risk. So I just wanted if someone could comment on that.
Excellent question.
I never speak up in this room, but I'll try. Dave Pinnell, year 12. And I think this touches on access, this touches on voice, this touches on risk, reconciliation, and I'm particularly interested in the notion of the journey, whether it's for the individual or for Pearson College as an organism, or for Pearson College within this thing called Canada, or Canada within this thing called the world, and how that fits with one of the bullet points around expeditionary learning. And I think of your own journey, Desiree, and your introduction today, and that journey across Canada at age 16, and that's a form of expeditionary learning within quite a spectrum of that model, right on through to the Kurt Hahn pieces with outdoor adventure and risk. So I'm curious how that model, that notion is being reinterpreted, redeployed, or where is it in that nascent state?
Thank you. We'll go with that. Thank you. There's a lot there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest a kind of lead answer from my colleagues, and then we can add as chip in. So I'm going to suggest that Heather, you take the question on the IB, Clint on student voice, but I know Heather will have things to say, I may as well. Ty on the issue around risk and service. And the pool, of course, the pool. I'm happy to address refugees and, yeah, particularly that one, the Shelby Davis, the impact, and et cetera. Then there was the issue of, in terms of student voice and preparation and leaving, Heather, preparation, leaving, and the other part of Jeremy's question. And the selection process, Heather. Cover everything? Disability,
yes.
access, and
exclusionary learning.
Ty, Will, and I'm going to jump in on a few of these as well. So, okay, so why don't we start with, Heather, why don't we start with you on the IB and...
Yeah, I'll try and do it progressively. So how do we manage selection first, beginning of the process? We work with our national committees, essentially. Thank you to our national committees. How do we make sure that is going well? I have been a strong supporter of the work that's been happening at the international office. They've really increased their ability to support national committees over the last 10 years. And so we have oversight and awareness of what's happening in committees in a radically different way than we used to. I'm also individually a member of the, wait for it, the International Committee of the Governance of the National Committee System. And so the CGNCS, and so that is now a formal committee of the International Board that looks at how it's going, what's going, are there issues, do we need to concern ourselves? So that's how. Is we really put our trust in that process and try and have some checks and balances. As a volunteer for the international office, I've visited a couple selections this year to see how they've done their means testing, how they've done their selection, get a chance to meet some of the families they're working with and just get a feel for it. And that's happening in many committees around the world. So I'm increased confidence in that area. Once people get here, are they going to be doing the IB? At the moment, yes. So at the moment, our partnership with the IB remains strong. We have had also a really keen insight into just how much flexibility we actually have in that program, with the benefit of having the academic director general be our former head. So for the past 3 years, David Hawley has been at the fulcrum of the IB office, and he said things to us like, nobody says you have to do it that way. Nobody says every student at Pearson College could not achieve a global politics course certification ever having entered a classroom. Nobody says it has to be timetabled. Every student at Pearson could get their global politics course, our Group 4 course, by attending global affairs sessions, by doing a project week project, looking at their home environment, by doing something in the summer. I mean, we have to be formal about it. We'd have to find some form of assessment for it, but there is flexibility. So at the moment, we're not abandoning the IB. We are, however, looking at what, in this individualized session idea, are there students for whom the entire IB diploma is not a realistic expectation? And instead of saying, I'm so sorry, that sounds hard for you, we are trying to find what a realistic expectation is and a solution for them. And we piloted last year a program for an individual student that combined her interests and skills. IB courses still very much involved in the program with some additional sort of off-ramps on the academics that would allow her to succeed. So I think that style of working with the IB will be our view forward. And you're going to handle student voice. I'm just going to say one thing about expeditionary learning. We are thinking expeditionary in its most broadest sense. That includes our kayaking program, that has, an initial skill-based program. Hey, I'm in my audience. That has an initial skill-based process that leads to a leadership opportunity in the second year that leads to working with outside partners in Paddle Canada and the Paddling Symposium, and then an actual expedition at the end of that, formal expedition at the end of those 2 years. But it also includes how our students who are really involved in intergroup dialogue, how can they learn some skills around intergroup dialogue, work in leadership in their second year, and find an application for that in the local community or in their home communities that would be expeditionary in their thinking. So that's some of the thinking, and we are at the nascent stages of reaffirming our interest in that, or our commitment to that style. Student voice?
Yep. I'll just add a little bit in that we've talked to folks in Mahindra, and they were very much challenging us to look at other models for students. And the students themselves, we hear a large number of them frustrated with the weight of the IB, and teachers as well, frustrated with having to put so much curriculum into a small period of time at the expense of the Pearson experience. So there's definitely folks looking at it as ways we could make the program more fitting with the ideals in and outside the classroom. Around the student voice, yeah, very much, right? Like these gatherings, it would always be the same voices because they felt at that young age confident enough to speak, often native English speakers. So recognizing that, one of the things I've witnessed happening, which is really great, is engaging with the whole community in active listening exercises, where we sort of slow everything down, break into pairs of 2, where one person speaks uninterrupted, sharing their views on the issue at hand for 2 minutes. The other person listens. The person then tells the other what they heard for a minute, so showing that they were actually listening, and then switching. Other ways is making sure that we don't just have 2-hour meetings here, but have breakout sessions often, so it's smaller groups and maybe about 10 people, and so that everyone can have a voice in the smaller groups, and then come back to the main room here and share the ideas that came from the group, so that people who have opinions that would often go missed come out. Because I don't know about you, but I always felt there was, and it continues to be this sort of social hierarchy idea of that we're all liberal-minded and such, and that if someone has a conservative view on something, you're really scared to share it. So in those smaller groups, someone could like raise it, and it might be a tough conversation, but it's a little bit easier when there's 10 people in the room, and at least we would get those views out here, so we could engage with it. So that's one of the things. As well, once we're making sure all faculty in the classrooms are aware of these tools to engage with the students in the classrooms. Some are more conducive than others, but that's one of the pieces. And as well, the Dean of Students, who's on leave for years, she initiated a Student Voices program.
It's actually called Student Voice.
It's actually called Student Voice, so that students could meet beforehand to put together ideas and such for village meetings. And as well, like I mentioned, I sort of organize them, but it's always student-led, and we do a lot of work beforehand so that we can gather the ideas and voices. And around the language piece, one village gathering we had, it took a bit longer because everyone is encouraged to speak in their second language if they had one. Faculty as well. So I tried to speak German, though I was actually screaming German at one of my colleagues, which can be almost a bit scary with the misunderstandings. But it was a good time to remind all the native English speakers, like, slow down, wait for some pauses. I will model that as well at times when I can, like this, to just, slow things down and allow for that time so that the nervous, hyperactive native English speaker just doesn't jump in with the solution. So, yeah, I think, and that's not coming from us, but from the students. They're the ones saying, we need this, we need this.
traditional circles?
No, not really. In the village gathering, no, it's too huge. And that's one of the things we've talked about, just physically. We tried once, we had sort of a usual kind of touchy-feely discussions to have outside of a village gathering, and a bunch of people came here, but it wasn't conducive, right? So, yeah, not so much. Yeah, we do circles, but what you're getting at in terms of indigenous traditional, no. Not yet. Now we're at...
I'm going to get up because I'm slow because of age. I think Desiree was talking about cohort equivalents. I think I'm year -1 or -2. I'm going to answer the question from Sharon, tied it to Dave, and of course Leah, because it's related to infrastructure and handicap access, the pool, and it ties into leadership. So risk management, yeah, it's a lot different today than it was 20 years ago and 30 years ago. I come from a background and a history of extreme risk management, where the balance in order to achieve the training necessary to acquire the skill sets and the confidence to do your job there was a fine line between really dangerous and, you know, are we going to do this? And sometimes you have to make that decision on the fly. And I think as Pearson has grown up, we have grown up with that evolution as well, in terms of making sure that the students still feel that liberty and that freedom to get out and challenge themselves, and yet at the same time not to step over the line in terms of our own common sense liability to take care of them, and also to make sure that you know, they come back safe to their dorms at the end of the day. So first of all, there were the black and white sort of safety standard issues that we had to deal with. And those are things like, for example, the old observatory trail. You know, we have a new trail. I don't know if you've tried it out, but we're still working on it. And if you feel like you need to do some shoveling, I mean, we might bring some fill in for you. But the trail is accessible, but the old trail was like that. And in British Columbia, when it rains during the winter, it can wash things out that are sort of built like that. And it did. So it exposed power lines and water lines and fiber optic cables. So we built a new, nice, meandering switchback trail to head up to the observatory as a safety issue. Broken steps, broken windows. So those were sort of black and white. Waterfront programs. We're working towards a system of certification. So I think one of the few certified programs we had in the past was the diving qualification. Certainly kayak has really come a long way under teacher and you know, staff leadership. So we're very proud of that. And we're moving ahead as well with sailing to bring in, not only get our teachers certified to instruct, so such that the students actually leave with a proper certification. You talked about activities like firefighting, and where the students were fully engaged as a response team. It was a really dangerous activity, especially in this environment with wood frame buildings and the intensity of a fire. Hopefully it never occurs, but should it have occurred, would be really, really dangerous for the students to do that. So we've got them involved in other things that actually get them certified and qualified, such as higher level of first aid. We've been engaging with the local fire and emergency response here in Metchosin. So a group of them did a full week of training, full B gear, and out there fighting fires with, you know, fully qualified and trained firefighters, just to get a sense of what it's like to do that activity. But they are our first responders, and whether it's a twisted ankle or a bloody nose, they're there on the spot, and they've just done an outstanding job. Great leadership training for those students. So just tying it together with sort of like the leadership piece.
Can I just ask a question just about what the implications are for the campus? They used to say to us, It takes 20 minutes for the Colwood fire truck to get here, but it takes 12 minutes for a residence to burn down.
Yeah.
So
it's
now what happens?
the answer to that is to let it burn. It's to get everybody out and let it burn. Yeah. Yeah. So
And
that's what
the
we teach them.
firefighting is closer now than it was.
Okay.
So yeah, the response, depending on who knows, but it's somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes. Yeah.
But is it still, that with the fire suppression in the new buildings, is it still 12 minutes?
The response time.
No.
The burn down time.
Well, the burn down time.
Yeah.
Depends on the season, probably.
You're in that the flashover state within 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So you've got 4 minutes to evacuate. And that's what we teach them when they come here. So in a few weeks when they come here, I show them a video, and it's the flashover video. It's probably from the 1970s or 80s, but it hits home really hard, just how quickly it happens. And even quicker here probably with the wood frame structures. So, I mean, I didn't get into it earlier, but one of the main priorities for student residence renovation that Dan was talking about earlier is because the 5 houses never had fire suppression. So 2 of them do now, Japan and Calgary, and we're just trying to get them done as quickly as we can. And to actually just retrofit fire suppression, you have to tear the whole place apart anyway. So we're doing it with the renovation. Handicap access. I was hoping Tony was still here, but he stepped out. But as you can see by the geography of Pearson, it's challenging for able-bodied people to get around here. So we've been, as you can see with the mess that I've created down by Desiree's house, with I call it the Dust Bowl, we're actually going to trying to repair some of the walkways and sidewalks that were done with asphalt. The trees have grown rather quickly over the last 20 years, and there's all kinds of undulations and bumps and tripping hazards. So that's one area we're going to smooth out and flatten out over there, and we're going to continue to do that across the campus. Handicapped access to buildings. Back in 1974, when they did that amazing feat of poof, here's a campus in 1 year. What they did not do back then is think about handicapped access. Now there have been some modifications over time, but even those are now in a state where they're no longer wide enough for modern wheelchairs. They're at a slope where it's not the right slope. So we have a lot of corrective things to do, even with the ones that were in place. The Everybody washroom in Japan House, we meant it to be a handicapped washroom, and subsequently found out that the vanity's too big, and it's actually could actually block a wheelchair. We're going to replace that vanity and make sure that one of the people we hired to do some of these renovations is actually handicapped himself. So we're very proud of that fact, but he's got a workshop that's completely lowered, and he's an amazing guy, and he actually helped us design that washroom and was one of the test agents to make sure it was okay.
And Ty, while you were absent this summer, one of our alum, who's a PhD in disability, architectural disability, whatever, he offered to come and consult with you.
Fantastic.
From North Carolina, where he teaches.
So I guess the point I was trying to make, the retrofitting of buildings for handicapped access is a real challenge because the entire building is not friendly. So as we actually build new structures, and hopefully that'll happen soon, obviously it'll all be handicapped access. The front of Japan House is going to be done in the next couple of weeks. It will have a handicapped access ramp. We're going to fix the Everybody washroom, and we're going to continue to work at that across the campus. The pool. Yes. It's sort of like, it took me a while to understand this, just to, I guess, Pearsonize myself and understand what it means to be part of this community and how important the pool is to the community. It was an amazing gift by the Molson family, a half-size Olympic pool for such a small population. But like many other community pools across Canada and the United States, they've been shutting down because of maintenance costs as they age out. So the pool's about 40 years old, and it's got a lot of problems. It's leaking, so environmental issues associated with that, and the supporting equipment around it, the piping and the plumbing and the heating system, the filtration system, all needs to be updated and replaced. It's a big bill, and we try and not to just look at things in terms of, well, what's the return on our investment in terms of usage, but I'm realizing now just how much it is connected to kayaking and diving and people that never learned how to, never had the opportunity to swim or even get swim instruction, and our students actually teach other students. So we're trying to devise a way in extending its life until we have a better solution. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, it can be a good revenue generator as well when we're not using the pool to share with our community.
It's just my thought.
She was speaking first, sorry, and
That's
then
all
we'll
right.
come to you.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, I think maybe it's easier to motivate alumni to give money when there's something very particular like that.
And you know what? We talked about it yesterday.
Let's. Yeah, I was going to say, what can we do?
Well, I've already got this the sort of the Save Our Pool campaign. Who's cheering for Save Our Pool?
I wanted to take it way beyond that. I don't know what's happening now because I haven't heard a lot about some of the services that were so critical to the college's mission in the day. Jeremy, Fob, Mike Gordon, myself, Leo, we were teaching amputee from the community how to scuba dive in that pool.
Yeah.
And that was pulling people from an atmosphere where they really don't have mobility into a place where they were as free as the rest of us. And that was an incredible experience for me. That was an incredible experience for the community out at large, outside of Pearson College. And that pool is the epicenter of it.
Yeah.
We're not just not connecting to each other, we're not connecting to the community. We're taking all of that away.
I guess the bottom line is we're really trying to look at every solution to save that pool before it sort of implodes on itself because of some of the structural issues.
Well, then I thought, maybe that's where they're going to build the global peace conference. It's all about a land grab.
Be a pool in it.
There could be a pool.
Pool in
in
it.
the center.
new
A
pool.
recreation center, yeah.
Very quickly, the pool knows, I can link it to reconciliation before it was a word in Canada, and certainly muddy beginnings that were far from perfect. As a student here, I remember Mark's McAdee was behind linkages with and what we do yesterday, the reserve, and getting some of the youth there. The UWC program, and we'd be in the pool, just like the Boys and Girls Club type. Play in the water safety, head up to race cross, canoe, kayak. It was just people meeting people in this turf where there'd be such a rich waterline. So it's exciting to hear that Save Our Pool or build a bigger, better, different pool or whatever it is. But it can link so well with that journey, with that expeditionary.
Agree wholeheartedly.
So I'm going to take the refugee question. Is there a burning question?
No, I was just making a final comment on the pool, and I realise this is a burning issue, but it's not the place, and I think also independently for students, it will enable access, wider access to lots of other students, water-based activities, you can't swim when you arrive here, you'll be excluded from that, you didn't have to know to swim. And I also think very importantly, people's physical and mental health, having access to that is really, really important. I think a lot of us, that is college, a lot wider than when we arrive. And actually, it's not like a school there would actually diminish everyone's physical health, but I think the mental health would be really, really important. I realize the issue is a lot for people, but it's one like that.
Yeah. Thank you. And I know that I am going to address the issue around Canadian universities and refugees and then try to wrap up.
And leaving the college.
And leaving the college. Then I have a few little comments on some of these things to wrap it up. Just conscious of people probably wanting to eat at 12.
Yes.
But conversation to be continued. I would encourage you as you're thinking about the sessions you're going to lead. We will be happy to participate. If you want one of us there or some of us there, we'll do that depending on the time of day. I certainly don't want to commit on behalf of people who don't live on campus. And certainly I'll be happy to be there to continue the conversation. So we know there is a lot more to talk about. This is the beginning of a conversation. Just to your question around refugees. So as you know, Pearson has been recruiting and supporting refugee students for decades through World University Service Canada. The UWC now has a refugee initiative. We are involved through a number of our faculty and staff in supporting that to ensure, so not just a recruitment issue, but also supporting the mental, sort of social, emotional, and academic well-being of these students, because like many students from vulnerable communities, it's irresponsible to actively recruit and then not provide the proper supports. And we have, as you know, many students for whom this is the first time in their lives that they feel in a safe place, and so a lot of things may come out as a result of that. In terms of the Shelby Davis scholarship, as you may be aware, for the last how many years has this existed, Heather? 15 years. So Shelby Davis is a major benefactor, American, to UWC USA, but also the entire UWC movement, and every single UWC graduate has the opportunity to go to one of 100 American universities, including the Ivy Leagues, for up to full scholarship, which is great. And his intention was to sort of infiltrate these American universities with UWC students and more international students. An unintended consequence is that more and more of our graduates are going to the US. So yes, we are looking to speak with Canadian universities. In fact, we are speaking with Universities Canada, which is the umbrella organization, to see if we can have some more partnerships. We do have some scholarships for our Pearson alum and UWC alum with Canadian universities, so we want to do more of that. But I will just say, in speaking to other heads, one of the unintended consequences, other than this sort of suck to the US, is that some of the students now applying are really focused on getting that Davis scholarship, and we're getting students, it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge in terms of really signing up for the UWC experience, which is not just an IB, which is the United World Colleges, a whole focus on learning through our head, heart, and hands, including service learning, and it is a challenge. And it is also a challenge, and we thank those of you, all of you, volunteering national committees. Students often arrive with wildly different expectations as to what their Pearson or other UWC school experience is going to be. And so part of our challenge is to really communicate clearly what is not only unique about a UWC education, but what is unique about a Pearson education. And that is central to our strategic planning going forward, rooted in our place, rooted in our history. What are our aspirations, including some of the things that you've mentioned. So that is a challenge for us, because students are, certainly we want very diverse students, but the diversity of expectations is a challenge in that it really is very across the spectrum, and so I think we need to define ourselves more clearly. In terms of leaving, just the question about leaving over here, sorry, Jeremy, yes. One of the things that we've done is, yes, my observation as a non-alum is my observation of my first leaving was that it was brutal. It was brutal, and then I was told, but that's part of the experience. I think, it doesn't have to be so brutal. So one of the things that we're doing is we're starting this sort of reverse orientation, if you will, much earlier, like months in advance. We also have more with alum in terms of life after Pearson, to talk about what that looks like after Pearson, and have our recent alum and not so recent alum come and speak to our students, and a whole program around reverse orientation. I will add, for the first time ever, and this is something we had to push through the system, was now our first year students this coming year, for the first time ever, I believe, in Pearson's history, will stay on after the second year's leave. So their whole end of year won't be defined exclusively by the second years. The second years will complete their exams, want to move on. There's no reason the first years need to leave. They're not even writing those exams. We are a UWC school. We're not just an IB school. Why should the academic year end just because the second years have written their last exam? So the first years will now stay on for 1 week. We've gotten to 1 week with our faculty for a Keystone or Capstone initiative, one team building among first years to prepare for their second year. Also more time to do more of the academic program, so it's less intense. It's always going to be intense, but less intense in the second year. And to embark on some expeditionary learning, sailing, kayaking, etc., and other forms of expeditionary learning. As you say, it's very broad. So that they have that team building and bonding, but also a really remarkable, we hope, Keystone experience. And so that's part of how we're dealing with end of year. And we hope, we're piling it, and we hope that it goes, we're confident it will go well. In terms of mobility, I think that was covered. One thing I will say, obviously it's a huge challenge at Pearson. My parents were supposed to spend their winters here. They can't because of my dad's mobility issues. So obviously this is first and foremost about students, but this is not a friendly place for anyone who has really any kind of mobility issue. So it's a real challenge. Of course there is Red Cross Nordic, and one of the things that we do, because we're all each quite small, most of the colleges in the UWC. So for example, whereas Pearson now has a summer program in English learning, we really have a much more robust mental health and wellness services, perhaps more so than other UWCs. We hosted a sort of health and wellness pastoral care conference for all the UWCs last year. So more and more students, as Heather pointed out the other day, we are getting perhaps more students with challenges in English because we have the summer program in English learning starting next week. We may be getting students who have, because we're better equipped perhaps, and then in terms of common but differentiated responsibilities, more students with mobility issues would be more likely to go to Red Cross Nordic. That's how the UWC comes at it. That doesn't let Pearson off the hook. That's something that we certainly aspire to, so we can truly be diverse in all of those in many, many different ways.
I just want to say, I think it's important to acknowledge that Pearson has hosted a good number of students with different disabilities over the years.
Including mobility?
Including mobility.
Yeah.
It's not
Okay.
being perfect.
Okay.
It's involved students carrying each other up and down stairs sometimes, but it's not like we're not talking blanket exclusion
Thank you.
either.
No,
I didn't know that.
We've had
Yeah.
blind students, we've had temporarily in
Yes.
wheelchair students.
Thank you. I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that.
It is
I have a question related to life after Pearson.
Liability.
Yeah, life after Pearson. Is there any statistics about how many of the students go back to their countries? Because you're talking about American universities, Canadian universities.
Yeah.
It would be interesting just to know how they come.
So I'm going to make a suggestion now, because I think we've covered most of the ground. I think it's 12 past, and I think that you all may have thought that we had a group photo right now. We've changed that. It's going to be held at your second village meeting, which you lead, and that will look a lot more, I hope, like what Clint described, which is some groups in open spaces. But I'd like those of you who want to lead anything in that village meeting to consult either with your organizing committee members or myself or both. And I'd like to thank the whole team here for having answered the questions. And there are another few little tweaks in the schedule changes. That will all be announced in the dining hall after you've had a good meal. So thanks a lot. Great.
Thank you.
I do have.
You've been on.